Thank you very much. And let me start by saying happy independence to you all. And also join me in appreciating Pastor Boju and the Covenant Christian Center for an amazing job. The former governor of my state and my brother, Peter Obi, he stepped out. And Professor Gupta was quite amazing. And let me say, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for my colleague Bismarck, I don't know what to say, and the council and council of advisors, welcome to the team as well. I remember when I was sworn in as chief economic advisor several years ago, the former president, after swearing us in, looked at us and said, "Gentlemen and ladies, congratulations. Your job is to advise me. And please advise well. My own job as the president is to decide whether or not to accept your advice. And never you insist that I must take your advice. If you want to insist that I take your advice, then go and contest for election and take over this seat." So I think we have a job cut out for us. Ladies and gentlemen, I was assigned a topic specifically to discuss the economic restructuring of Nigeria. And I must say that I accepted to be here some 5 months ago and put together some of my thoughts a few weeks back. But when the announcement of my membership of the council was announced a few days ago, I wasn't quite sure whether or not I should still be here or whether I should still read my paper. But in the end, I decided to be here, but with apologies, that I decided to take away a big chunk of those macroeconomic, structural, sectoral policies, programs, projects for the moment, required for the moment. That's the job of the council. When you advise in camera. And we're going to do our job there. And I decided to remove all the things that I thought would probably be for the council and the government itself to deal with. I don't want to preempt the council. And let me say that I'm focusing very specifically, ladies and gentlemen, on a much narrower focus, and that is to focus on the future. I'm looking at Nigeria in some years to come. 20 years' time, the oil will be history. By the time a child born today in Nigeria is 30 years of age, there will probably be 400 million Nigerians. When she is 80, there will probably be about 752 million Nigerians, if you believe the population numbers and the growth rates. Lagos is projected to be about 88 million by the end of this century. And can you imagine 4 times the number of people today in Lagos? All these people, ladies and gentlemen, will need water, they will need food, they will need housing, they will need medication, schools, hospitals, and yes, they're going to need jobs. I want to focus on that future and to ask whether we are actually preparing enough to be able to welcome the 400 million Nigerians in 30 years' time, or the 752 million Nigerians in 80 years' time. Just think about it for a moment. And so my focus, ladies and gentlemen, is on the kind of institutional arrangements that will help in getting the future economy to stand and to be sustainably so. And so, what I'm going to talk about, because of we are now in this council, and for obvious reasons, I will have to read specifically some of the key points that I have noted here. We concentrate on the political, legal, governance foundation upon which that future will stand. Our thesis, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm partly maybe responding to what you said, it's not the issue of bad ideas, bad economic ideas or whatever, but I will say what is fundamentally wrong. What is fundamentally wrong, ladies and gentlemen, is that since 1962, we've implemented first, second, third, fourth national development plans. We've also had the structural adjustment program. We've had all kinds of plans, all designed to diversify the economy, all designed to restructure the economy away from dependence on oil. But we're still tied to the, if you like, to the life support of the oil sector. It hasn't happened. And now we're still talking about the same thing. Every government in Nigeria has implemented its own version of restructuring, diversification. And I'm going to argue here that if you want to change a persistent economic structure, you have to change the underlying institution. If you want to change a persistent economic structure, change the underlying economic institution. Our experience with the needs proves this, ladies and gentlemen. When we were drafting the needs agenda, we realized that we've been parroting private sector-led economy in Nigeria for decades. But we realized that we didn't have the requisite institution, financial institution. Without the requisite financial institution, you couldn't have a private sector-led economy. And so we recommended, I think on page 75 of the needs document, that we should have a recapitalization or consolidation of the banks. When I became governor of the central bank, we had 89 rickety banks, all of which put together were less than the number 4 bank in South Africa. If you needed $500 million to do an investment in Nigeria, you needed to syndicate it from all the banks put together. You couldn't talk about a private sector-led economy. It was just a slogan. So we decided that you needed a new institution. And that new banking institution was the consolidation of the banking sector. And what was the result? After the consolidation, we raised the capital to approximately $200 million then, and then the race to the top led to bigger and bigger banks that began to emerge. And after that, our banks are now the new multinationals all over the world. And today, our banks can now syndicate billions of dollars for particular investors to be able to invest. That's when the private sector-led economy can begin. So our thesis is, if you want to change a persistent economic structure, change the underlying institutions. My former governor is here. I think his own bank, Fidelity. I don't know whether you could fund 5 billion naira worth of project then, but then afterwards, I'm sure you could now do quite a whole lot. But let's get to the serious business, ladies and gentlemen. For the national economy, our thesis is that it will be difficult to have a competitive and prosperous post-oil economy of the future with additional hundreds of millions of Nigerians or citizens with a dwindling land space with the same legal institutional foundation designed for consumption of the oil rent. You can't build a 100-story building upon a foundation of an old bungalow. You can't. A post-oil economy requires that agents maximize their fullest potentials, and what is required will be a national rather than a federal response. You can't clap with one hand. We've been trying to implement policies or design policies by the federal government. This is a federation, ladies and gentlemen. We're trying to clap with one hand. What we need, our focus is wealth creation in the future. If that focus is on wealth creation rather than sharing and consumption of oil rents, then, ladies and gentlemen, we need a new national business model. And I will show that it is both issue of you are designing good ideas, good plans, but without the right or underlying infrastructure to carry those plans forward. It will be the thesis I will leave with you. And I will say, the fundamental argument here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the link between law, constitution, institutions, and judiciary and the economic transformation seems to be the weakest link in our design of national agenda. The National Assembly, the Ministry of Justice, the states and other stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, in the future we need to get seriously down to work. I'll have a message for the elite, but I think let's ride on. I will say I haven't come here to read the book of Lamentations about Nigeria's economic woes, nor have I come to sing the Song of David. For decades, we have tried the transformation agenda, which hasn't worked. But like I said, whether we are going to have 400 million Nigerians or 752 million Nigerians by the end of the century, within this tiny landmass, 923 square kilometers of land that is also declining due to desertification and erosion, we are going to have the highest population density in the world among the top 10 most populous countries. Lagos, as I said, 88 million people, and it's going to be a nightmare. By the way, it's our view that Lagos is clearly unsustainable in the long run and risky for its business concentration. But ladies and gentlemen, the world is not waiting for Nigeria. The world is on the fourth industrial revolution with digital economy, and we are struggling with the first stage of restored stages of growth. The rest of the world, with artificial intelligence, together with the future technologies such as robotics, synthetic biology, computational science, quantum computing, 3D and 4D printing, Internet of Things, and so on and so forth, self-driving vehicles, all will surely produce totally different social and economic configurations than what we know today. China, the Made in China 2025 plan has targeted 10 industries China wants to lead and dominate the world. The US is responding very vigorously. All these will have humongous effects and with creative destruction going on with job losses and future structural unemployment. While electric cars are fast replacing diesel and petrol cars, many of our people are still building petrol stations. Small shops are proliferating while agglomeration in terms of huge shopping malls, together with e-shopping, is everywhere. Automation is upon us. The ordinary people who can't explain what has hit them resort to all sorts of criminal activities to survive. There are all kinds of, if you see the futurologists, people try to see how the world is evolving, the billions of people being added to the population of the world, and everybody concludes that the world will need new systems for food, water, energy, education, health, skills, development and job creation and everything, if we are going to be able to feed, clothe, and educate all these billions of people coming around. Economic restructuring that I have been asked to speak on, therefore, strategy of the future, will entail thinking through the alternative future scenarios and mapping out alternative possible proactive responses. The question for Nigeria is, in which areas or sectors do we proactively position to become the global leaders by the end of 2050, for example, or the end of the century. Closer home, Nigeria has just signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The implication, and Professor Gupta has highlighted this, insularity will no longer be an option. The name of the game of the future in an increasingly integrated world is innovate, compete, or die. That's the name of the game of the future. And let's break it down. The economic restructuring of the future that we try to envisage will be about positioning Nigeria to protect and win in an increasingly complex world, thereby guaranteeing the security, prosperity, and happiness of the 400 million that will soon be upon us, or the 752 million Nigerians, in a world without oil. In a world without oil. I said before, so far we've been living on the life support of oil for these decades. If oil goes up, economically we go up. It goes down, the economy slumps. You remove that life support, the economy collapses. But we must prepare to feed and provide prosperity for the 400 million Nigerians, or 752 that will be upon us sooner or later, without oil. And our thesis is that the system that we have, the institutions we have, were for a bungalow. The new economy that we need to build is a 100-story building, and we cannot put the 100-story building on this foundation that has been laid for a bungalow. And so, let us get on. And for Nigeria, for example, more specifically, with a current GDP of about 400 billion, down from 540 billion, and negative per capita income growth, just like Gupta said, with rising poverty and unemployment, the restructuring of the future would entail transformational changes to generate and sustain broad-based growth of at least 7%, up from the recent 1 to 2%, which is required for poverty reduction and employment generation. Put differently, if we want to be a middle-income country by the end of this century, 80 years' time, and for example, say $7,500 per person, up from about $1,930 today, what we need will probably be an economy from 400 billion today to about 5.5, more than 5.5 trillion economy then. But this will require then that this economy has to be growing at the minimum of a double-digit growth. And we have to sustain it for much of the entire remaining 80 years for this to happen. So, the plan to do this will not require thinking outside of the box. It will require thinking without the box at all. At the macro level, the fundamental challenge currently is that our economy is stuck at a very low speed lane in the context of what you might call the debt cliff with little fiscal space. Why monetary policy is at near its limits, with low savings investment trap, with rising unemployment and poverty. To get to poverty reducing and employment generating trajectory in the short term requires serious heavy lifting with major difficult choices and extraordinary coordination ahead. And surely the governments at all levels have their jobs cut out for them, and we don't dwell on this here. In sum, we argue that the alternative future that we see is without oil, and where other exhaustible natural resources play very little role. The future will be driven by people, our youths, and technology. Nigeria's people, youths, remain its potentially greatest asset, potentially renewable resource for productivity, huge market, and even export. Yes, the next bigger than oil export earner for Nigeria will potentially be its human capital. Currently, Nigeria earns almost as much from oil as it earns from remittances from our diaspora. But we cannot export illiterates in a world driven by digital technology, digital revolution. Our greatest resource is human beings of the future without oil. But we're not going to export illiterates. The easiest way to waste the future is to continue to churn out millions of semi-illiterate, largely unemployable citizens, most of whom see criminality as the only route to escape poverty trap or drug as the opium for solace. With an urbanization rate of over 5%, the conflagration that might ensue when hundreds of millions surge to the cities but can't find jobs, housing, water, and food can only be imagined. Soon, I believe, the rich won't be able to sleep because the poor, homeless, and angry are awake. And by the way, who says that we can't have a smart population policy that encourages people to have the number of children that they can train, and then also ensure that we have reliable population census using biometrics rather than the political population figures we have today? Whatever the case, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge is to how to deliberately optimize the potentials of the huge youthful population to be highly productive at home and competitive or exportable abroad. An educational system with a 21st century curricula powered by technology that guarantees one youth 1 to 3 skills might be the winning strategy. As the Western population ages and declines, they will need productive labor, and Nigeria can smartly position to become the largest supplier of such labor, indirectly through outsourcing or directly. Nigeria has no choice but to leapfrog the industrialization ladder and services sector to provide urban jobs and rely upon smart technology to grow the food to feed the hundreds of millions. Peasant agriculture has little future, especially as the population surges with rapidly declining plot of land per capita. Don't forget, if we continue to prosper relative to the other African countries, then given the free movement of goods and persons protocol, the others will continue to surge into Nigeria with the tiny piece of land that we have. So the complications of the future will even get more complicated. But ladies and gentlemen, the question is, you can design all these plans, have glossy documents, but how is it going to be? How is it going to happen? My question is whether the existing foundation is adequate or appropriate for the dynamics and challenges of the future. And I'm sorry to say, my view is that unfortunately the answer is no. Our Constitution, this is the key point. Our Constitution, together with its command and control institutions, concentrated at Abuja, was designed for and around the sharing and consumption of the oil rent. It is largely obsolete for the demands of a productive economy without oil rents, which requires competitive and flexible rather than unitary federalism. As the oil rent that held the system together is tapering off, its internal contradictions have burst open, requiring a coterie of survivor coping mechanisms to keep the system afloat. But the question is, for how long? For how long will all this, what you might call fire on the mountain, just trying to survive each day, for how long further are we going to go? And I'll share with you 2, 3 examples that this system itself cannot carry the future. The first, I think Nigerians don't pay attention to this. The fragile state index that is composed or compiled by the Fund for Peace of the US. It has a set of 4 clusters of variables that tries to, and then 12 in detail, that tries to help them to predict the susceptibility of a state to collapse. Nigeria has been falling since 2005 from number 54 on that ranking. Now, over the last 8 years, we've been stuck between number 13 and number 15. We are ranked in the same category as countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Haiti, Guinea, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, etc. That's the same category where we are. And I want to say that long-term sustainable transformation must address the root of this systemic decline. In a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society such as ours, designing institutions for stability and prosperity requires great care and should always be work in progress. In 2005, when we delivered a Democracy Day lecture, we highlighted this, that we have a dysfunctional federal system, and that this system, in a world without oil, cannot endure. Wouldn't be able. It's a system designed for consumption, for sharing and consumption. It is inefficient for a system where you now want to transit to productive production and competition. It is a fundamental argument. We made it in 2005, and we've been consistently pushing this argument. The world without oil will be a different one. We showed that Section 162 of our Constitution has created a perverse lottery effect, destroyed the incentive system for wealth creation on the part of governments, and foisted an indolent culture of entitlements. As opposed to the productive self-financing regions of the First Republic, all tiers of our government today have to go to Abuja every month, to beg to get something. Except Lagos and maybe one or two other states, I don't think any other, including the federal government, can actually fund this recurrent expenditure without the oil money. If you add to this the suffocating concentration of powers at Abuja, with all the inefficiencies, Abuja today runs, the federal government, hundreds of parastatals and agencies of government trying to micromanage the entire country inefficiently, I would say, with the recurrent expenditure of the federal government plus debt servicing exceeding total federal revenue. Abuja imposes common standards, not minimum standards, sets the same wage to be paid by all states irrespective of their incomes. Of course, with the assumption that everybody, maybe the oil money, will pay the bill. It maintains federal marriage registry, issues driver's license, which should be local affairs, runs primary, secondary schools, centralized policing. The list is endless. And the question is whether this system is a system we expect to be able to deliver prosperity to the future 400 or 750 million Nigerians. It's come to a halt. Abuja cannot pay its bills, let alone with 207 million, not to talk about when you have 400 and something and 752, we got to be serious now and get to serious work. It controls all natural resources. Land Use Act is there. But let me give you an example, one final example. I have a long list of them to show that Abuja as it is today is choking, and we cannot create a competitive economy without loosening the stranglehold of Abuja on the entire economy and on the entire country. One final example is our judicial system, and this point is hardly ever, seriously discussed. Property rights and rule of law constitute the foundation of a modern economy. In Nigeria, we copied the American presidential system, but forgot to copy their multi-layer judicial system consistent with a federation. Instead, we are struck with a highly centralized system consistent with the command and control structure of the 1999 Constitution, with its unitary federalism. Every little matter can end up on appeal at the Supreme Court, the only one Supreme Court we have. If someone steals his neighbor's goat in Calabar, or there is a dispute over ownership of a shop in Jos, or someone dupes a petty trader of her capital in Lagos, the cases may, on appeal, all end up at the same Supreme Court. A pre-election dispute over in a local election matter in Yobe or Abia, purely local affair, could also end up at the Supreme Court. And many of these cases, the judgment will come long after the wrong candidate has finished serving out the full term. The courts are seriously over-congested. About 117,000 pending cases at the Federal High Court alone. Tens of thousands at the Court of Appeal. I've had conflicting figures about the number pending at the Supreme Court. Some say about 30-something thousand, I've heard 40-something thousand, and so on and so forth. But someone informed me that since 2007, no civil case or so that has been lodged on appeal has even been called up for hearing at the Supreme Court. That's 12 years ago. Chidodin Kalo has calculated the congestion rate to be about 180-70%, and 86% of the people in Nigeria's prisons today are awaiting trial. And several times, some of them spend times, if they had been convicted originally, maybe it would have been spending 2 years. Some of them spend 10, 15 years for jails and so on and so forth. Judges are grossly overworked and grossly underpaid. Nigeria's Supreme Court, in my view, is probably the only one in the world where the judges sit every day. And yet, pending cases keep mounting in thousands. As the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. How do we expect the future economy to compete and win? This is the point. In a world, in a society where it can take more than 20 years to settle a simple commercial dispute, which takes few days in other countries. Also, our system for fighting corruption is again concentrated at Abuja. And can we seriously expect the ICPC or EFCC or whatever to police the 774 local governments and the potentially 400 or 752 million Nigerians of the future? We've got to be serious. We can go on and on, but the global evidence, in summary, is that institutions drive economic transformation. But sadly, much of our institutions are either obsolete or inappropriate for the demands of that future that we talk about. I can go on and so forth. But let me say this, that there is no issue today that commands greater, broader consensus in Nigeria than the recognition that the current system needs fundamental overhaul, and hence the deafening call for, quote, restructuring the Nigerian Federation. Almost the entire Nigerian socio-political groups, Southwest, the Yoruba nation, South, Southeast, in the Igbo Middle Belt, the former Northern region, have either produced or are working to announce their template for restructuring Nigeria. Even some political parties led by the All Progressive Congress have either announced details of their position on restructuring or made through federalism, as in the manifesto of parties like APOGA and so on, the centerpiece of their manifestos for a better Nigeria. More fundamentally, APC has promised a bolder action plan in its 2015 manifesto. And let me quote it, and then we come down to what Bismarck said. It's not to say it, it's to do it. Quote, let me quote their manifesto. It's still on the internet. Quote, as a change agent, APC intend to cleanse our closet to halt the dangerous drift of Nigeria to a failed state, with a conscious plan for post-oil economy in Nigeria. To achieve this laudable program, APC government shall restructure the country, devolve power to the units with the best practices of federalism, and eliminate unintended paralysis of the center. End of quote. This was 2015. During the last election, general election, several candidates ran on the platform of restructuring. The loudest agitation seems to come from some ethno-religious political organizations and occasionally some politicians. Unfortunately, the economic argument for the restructuring is lost. clouded by the politics of the agitation. A mutual suspicion has crept in about motives, and the word restructuring now means different things to different people. So for us, ladies and gentlemen, for me, maybe it is time for us to simplify the language. Maybe change the language. If the problem is the word restructuring, let's call it something else. Let's call it systemic or institutional reforms, devolution and fiscal federalism, designing a new constitution for prosperity. We know it's going to be a legal, institutional, legal, political process with continuing bargaining among different interest groups and ensuring compromises, but should be guided by our history and evidence. Useful lessons may also be learned from other countries such as Switzerland, United Arab Emirates, Canada, the US, and Brazil. Let's keep it simple but focused on the future, designing the appropriate legal and institutional governance infrastructure to ensure the security and prosperity of the future for the 752 million Nigerians in 80 years' time, or perhaps even in the 22nd century, Nigeria might become the most populous country in the world if current population trends continue. What should we do? What should be done? I've summarized quite a few of them, and I'll read them very quickly. Number one, I'm saying it's not just that we have ideas. We're building economic ideas, but we can decide as a people. Two strategies you can decide in the short to medium term to be modeling through, doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a different result. We do them and preach diversification. Preach diversification, restructuring, and whatever, and so on and so forth. Or, as I said at the beginning, change the underlying institution, and you generate new dynamic and a new trajectory for the economy. So I start by saying the first point of duty is to create what I call a productive, progressive constitution for a world without oil. I've labeled out what this would be, but part of the challenges will be for us to address those clusters of variables in the U.S. Fund for Peace Fragile States Index, and which ranked Nigeria under the red alert category. This is very important to become a framework for framing public policy. In 2003-2004, Nigeria was in the list of the non-compliant nations for the Financial Action Task Force. We thought that getting Nigeria out of that deadly list, together with having debt relief, will be critical to re-engineering the economy. We succeeded. It required legislation to be able to do that, and some actions. And finally, we got out of that, and the economy obviously had a breathing space. Obviously, before then, you couldn't even open letters of credit and so on, or confirm letters of credit with the rest of the world. So similarly, exiting the red alert category under the Fragile State Index is a desideratum. We must do whatever it takes to get Nigeria out of that red alert category. You will wonder why companies are relocating to Ghana. If we have a continental free trade area, of course you can now export anywhere irrespective of your location. So they are going to, Ghana ranks number 110 and Nigeria ranks number 14. We have quite a long way to go. Number two, devolution of powers according to the principle of subsidiarity and variable geometry. Away from the current system of unitary federalism with this choking concentration of powers and responsibilities at the inefficient center, thereby giving power back to the people. Unless we assume that oil boom will come back again and endure, devolution is a matter of survival for the federal government itself and the economy. The federal government should loosen its hold on policing, on electricity or power, railways, ports, aviation, business incorporation, vehicle and driver's licenses, taxation powers, regulatory functions, schools, prisons, etc. Less. I can't understand. The federal government is trying to run the entire country from Abuja. And if you want to create prosperity and competition for the 21st century, create a new trajectory for the economy, something different has to happen. You've got to loosen that hold and leave the other subnational governments to be able to take initiative. I think by creating the unitary system, Abuja has sought to keep everybody in check, but in the process ended up holding everybody down. I think Cross River, if they can have ports, the Niger Delta states, for example, could all partner with maybe international investors to develop their ports, and you quickly unleash the logjam here in Lagos, the Apapa, and we're busy discussing how to decongest the ports. Free up the hold, and then these guys, they can bring in international, maybe Chinese or whatever investors, they can develop even better, deeper ports elsewhere. And that's how you are going to create the revenues that they are going to get from there. We'll develop some others, let everybody else keep their own resources. We should have devolution. I think that solid minerals, I will say, will have a new fiscal federalism which alters the incentives faced by the economic agents. We argue here that we should scrap the local government system, should be scrapped from the Constitution. A federation has 2 federating units, not 3. We should just have that. Creating this common thing, everybody going to Abuja, is peculiar to our own federation, and I think it's something not quite right. Furthermore, we should scrap Section 162 of the 1999 Constitution. It needs to be scrapped and replaced with a fiscal arrangement that is consistent with devolution of powers. We also need to abrogate the Land Use Act of 1978 and Solid Minerals Act and the various Petroleum, Gas Acts and amendments, and return the right of ownership, control and exploitation of these assets to the federating units as proposed even by the APC Committee on Restructuring, led by Governor Rufai. In turn, they should pay appropriate taxes to the federal government. Let Zamfara keep their gold and pay taxes to the government. Let Kaduna keep their solid minerals, Kogi, and so on and so forth, Nasarawa, and all these. I think most states of the Federation have got their own solid minerals. We're not going to develop them under the current system with Abuja trying to be the one to run all of them. My state doesn't have much, but in the US, it is this kind of competitive federalism that forced a state like Nevada, with neighbors such as California, rich California, and wandering without natural resources and saying, what do we do? And then necessity is the mother of invention. They decided to think through what they are going to do. And what did they do? They decided, okay, what is it that people don't like anywhere else? You come to Nevada. They don't like gambling elsewhere. Come to Nevada and do gambling. If you don't want this, come to Nevada and do it. And they thought smartly. So they reach other people all over America, but then get into Las Vegas and all the kind of thing. They created their own new economy and so on and so forth. The central point is that we should liberate this choking hold, stranglehold on the country, so that innovation, competition, and so on and so forth can begin to ensure. We need the Fiscal Responsibility Act to constrain irresponsible fiscal behavior and provide incentives to create wealth. I have a whole lot of the details here, but we need to. The important thing is that we're not going to create a new competitive economy that prospers for the coming hundreds of millions of Nigerians without liberating the stranglehold of Abuja on the system. Tax powers, for example. If you get to Washington, D.C., people decide, and you have Maryland, just in the next bit, people decide whether to shop here or there because the sales tax is different. Once you cross the boundary between Washington, D.C. and Maryland, the sales tax is different. But here we impose one common uniform VAT for everybody, and everybody collects it in Abuja. If I have a company, if there is a company that comes to Nigeria let me say, it's the one, I don't want to give an example with alcohol or something else. It goes to state A, and to give them land to be able to build, and they say, no, we can't give you. And it goes to state B, and they provide their own land, provide infrastructure, provide everything, and they establish there. You will say, oh, they will collect income tax. What if in the future world of robotics, and it doesn't need much human persons to run, and it's just on robotics, the whole income tax is paid to Abuja, and perhaps the state that said no, go away, will even collect more of the tax revenue, and so on. Where is then the incentive for that state to begin to promote industrialization in its state? So the taxation powers of this state, there is no incentives for the states and local governments to attract and promote industrialization. So let's stop kidding ourselves. We're talking we need to industrialize, we need to get on this. You can preach it from now to Armageddon, but anyway. We set up common salary scales, common everything. Everything is common. Minimum wage, the same, unitary system. It constrains everybody to the same speed instead of multiple speed. And we need to loosen up this, ladies and gentlemen. The legal judicial infrastructure is the second one. And I say in the 21st century, a prosperous economy is not sustainable without a sound and efficient judicial system. We need a progressive and practical new structure that can deliver justice to the hundreds of millions of Nigerians and businesses at the shortest possible time. As a layman, we wonder why Nigeria cannot have state or zonal appeals and Supreme Courts over local and state matters, or why state election matters should go to federal courts in a federation. I don't understand it. Our productive, progressive constitution should provide for specialized courts, especially commercial courts. Nigeria needs to invest heavily on the judiciary. Infrastructure with cutting-edge technology, as well as continuous upgrading of knowledge and skills of our judges. Our judiciary should be part of our national brand. Let's do what it takes to brand Nigeria as a nation of laws. For example, London could not have become an international financial center without an efficient judicial system, or thousands of contracts around the world indicating London as the jurisdiction for adjudication or arbitration. Can we at least target to be the #1 legal jurisdiction in Africa? At the minimum, we are the largest economy in Africa. Why can't we have the best judiciary? And with the continental free trade area now, businesses are going to locate to places where things can move. If it takes you minimum of 20 years or so, or some commercial cases lasting 20-something, 30-something years, why would you be there? And I think we got to think about it. And you want to create prosperity, and you want these factories, these businesses to be flooding to the country? Come on. Anyway, I think our justice ministry will have a new job description that is very developmental. Now I ask the question, what is holding action then? This might seem an onerous agenda, but we can start with what I call the minimum template, low-hanging fruit. The APC committee, headed by Governor Rufai, provided, very interesting recommendations, but 3 of them stand out. It says we should have state police, we should scrap the local government system from the Constitution, and they prescribe for resource control. Okay? It says the APC recommends the abrogating the extant legislations and transferring rights over minerals to the federating units or the states. With the APC committee and manifesto, it is fair for Nigerians to ask, so what's holding action? But I must say, at least the APC, they have it in their manifesto, they have it in their, they have now a committee report. I would also ask even the major opposition party, PDP, where is your own report? Where is your own position on that? aside from what your presidential candidate said during the election? Where is the PDP's own position on this particular kind of issue? So what we suggested is a fundamental plan for Nigeria's future prosperity without oil. The contradictions are many. We have a choice for preemptive, proactive action to orchestrate a new productive rather than sharing consumption structure, or wait until change is forced upon us in a most chaotic manner. A wise man gets the umbrella ready before the rain starts. We are currently at a cul-de-sac and need a fundamental disruptive change to reverse the trend. Our central message is that systemic restructuring is not only progressive politics, but excellent economics. And the third point is to fix our broken politics through ideological and value-oriented mass participation. A secure, prosperous country of the future won't drop from the skies, nor can we legislate politics out of public policy. Every advanced or progressive society we see in the world today is a product of organization struggles and continuous contestations for a more perfect union or society. In a democracy, there's no other road to a better future than the instrumentality of politics. Politics is therefore too serious to be left to only those who call themselves politicians. It is our collective destiny. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, our politics is broken. It is destructive rather than developmental. We define Nigeria's current politics as largely a dining table politics, or you chop, I chop politics, or what an author describes as it is our turn to eat politics. Consequently, political parties are mere platforms to grab power. Same people, same interests, driven by crass opportunism and primitive accumulation. It is largely about what is in it for my pocket and not about how can I contribute to leave the world better than I met it. When a minister is appointed, his friends and ethnic group or religious group shamelessly complain or celebrate, depending on whether they consider the appointment juicy, unquote, or dry, end unquote. I remember when my membership of this council was announced, there was some debate. Some people say, no, you should accept it. Some say you shouldn't. And that debate, I got, hundreds of calls. And I remember one particular one, a friend who thinks he was thinking about me, he called me and said, he said it in Igbo and I will translate it to you. He said, Narapono Fifano. And I said, what about it? He said, he just said, my friend, leave this job for them. And I asked why. He said, but there is no money. It's just a committee work. Yet the same people complain about corruption in government. We have a national crisis of value dressed in hypocrisy. We really have a long way to go to the future of our dream, but then we have a long way to go. For starters, we need to fix our electoral and judicial system so that only votes count and all votes are counted. This will transfer real power back to the people, free from the stranglehold of an opportunistic elite. With power in the hands of the people and with the institutional reforms proposed above, which require leaders with capacity for wealth creation, then ideas-based cake-baking politics can begin to emerge. The current politics is woven around the sharing and consumption of the oil rent, and you don't need any productive skills to be a person of ideas to be able to, quote, share the money. But the oil money is fast running out. Total income from oil is barely $100 per person, not even enough to give our children 21st century education, primary and secondary education. The federal government budget for 2019 on per capita is barely $120. And this is to fund debt servicing, 22% pay salaries, run huge bureaucracy, schools, hospitals, and everything. The obscene cost of governance and stealing at all levels of government is known. This is within the context that some millions of children are out of school, over 30% of our population are food poor, millions without medication, water, housing, jobs, while a few politicians display obscene lifestyle. In the US, I don't know how many of you read it, about the governor of Maine, the state of Maine. The state of Maine has a per capita income of more than $47,000. For context, Nigeria is about 1,930. For comparison, this governor's salary is $70,000 per annum, the lowest in the US. The family of they were himself and the wife, they were trying to save money to buy a RAV4 car for the wife. And the wife had to take up a job in a restaurant to augment their income. As governor of the state of Maine, with per capita income of over $47,000. In Nigeria, even for states with per capita income of probably less than $500, you can complete the rest of the story by yourself. I think, in my view, sooner or later something will give. And totally different politics need to emerge to secure the future. I think for those of us who are out there, ideas-based and the ideologically driven politics is the politics for the future. Forget about the names of these parties. Democratic, progressive, liberal. There are no discernible differences except the membership. Even the membership also switches and changes every minute. If you review the manifestos of the various candidates during the last election, very disappointing indeed, very troubling. I don't need to get into the details of that. If you see a PDP state or you see an APC state, how will you recognize it? It's something for you to think about. So when I say there isn't anything, it's just musical chairs, just to grab power and do what they want to do. Beyond sloganeering, we have serious work to do. We say that beyond sloganeering, we need a system that transit from a rentier cake baking system to one of cake baking, from cake sharing to cake baking. Citizens of conscience, regardless of ethnicity and religion, must realign along ideological lines to offer Nigerians real alternatives regarding the pathways to their future. Mass participation, founded on patriotism, passion, and values of hard work and integrity, should drive the politics of the future. Those who have something to offer for a better future, especially our youths, must stand up to be counted or stop complaining. The perverse value system of some of our youths, summarized by the phrase, "get rich young or die trying," is not part of the future that we're talking about. We must be the change that we want to see. Only a vigilant and active citizenry that holds public officers to account will secure the kind of future that we are envisaging. And we must now conclude. Our summary message is that an alternative, even better future for Nigeria, for what I call the next Nigeria, for the 400 or 752 million Nigerians, is possible. It is a future without oil, but powered by our greatest asset, human capital plus technology, and which guarantees security, prosperity, and happiness. But transition to that future requires a new foundation, as it is impossible to build a 100-story building upon the foundation of a bungalow, of an old bungalow. Elements of this foundation, in summary, include what I call the productive, progressive constitution that creates a competitive federation, devolution of power that unbundles our Abuja and loosens its choking stranglehold on the economy, a fiscal federalism that promotes competition, innovation, and hard work, a new judicial structure and performance that brands Nigeria as a country of laws with the best judiciary in Africa, and a new developmental politics with the citizens' power. Of course, Nigeria has got a long list of problems, but adversity comes with opportunities. With a will to overcome the problems should not stop us, nor should a few thousands of miscreants, let's even say a few millions, let's even say that all the miscreants all these criminals. Give them 1 million, 2 million, 3, 5, let's even be 10 out of about 207, 210 million people. The kidnappers, terrorists, internet scammers, bandits, drug barons, robbers, treasury looters, let them not be the ones that define us. As we build the foundation for the next Nigeria, we must seize the narrative and sing a new song to rebrand Nigeria. As we bemoan the rising poverty and unemployment, we still remind ourselves that ours is still the largest economy in Africa, and Nigeria as home to the most populous black nation on earth. When I hear about the 77 FBI list, I remember that Nigerians constitute the most educated and highest earning immigrant community in the US. When I hear about the drug barons, I remember that our labor market has the largest business incubator in the world. When the news about kidnappers, bandits, and terrorists are done the headlines, I remember the over 200 million law-abiding and hard-working citizens. When I hear about the Afrophobia and the stereotyping of Nigerians in South Africa, I recall that the richest black man and woman, Dangote and Mrs. Acadia, are Nigerians, or that Tony Elumelu Foundation is empowering thousands of young African entrepreneurs, or Allen Onyema APs recently took over the job of a government by transporting hundreds of Nigerians from South Africa free of charge. Or that the Glow Communications is owned by our own Mike Adenuga, or that the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief Emeka Anyok, is a Nigerian. And yes, that the Nigerian bank, Zenith, GTB, UBA, Access, FBN, Union, and I will not forget Fidelity, you are here. Have, since after the banking consolidation, become multinational corporations all over Africa. And that Nigerian investment banker, Adebayo Ogunlesi, bought over the Gatwick Airport and some other airports in the UK. When someone remarked that Obi-Wan, the famed Forbes kid, alleged scammer, is from Nnewi, I quickly reminded him that Ibeto, Innocent Motors, Chikas, and Charis, Emeka also from Nnewi. And when someone tells me that our youths are underperforming, I remind her of the youths at the Acadia Computer Village, or that the young man from Anambra just invented a generator that runs on water, or the young girl from Regina, Patchy Secondary School or Nature who won the Global Prize for Innovation. And don't forget that the patent for the world's fastest computer belongs to Philip Emeagwali, and that Gilani Aliyu from Sokoto designed the Chevrolet Volt car. Or when someone tells me that Nigerians can't write, I mention Annabelle Lore Wole Soyinka, Genoace, and yes, the new kid on the block. I know my daughter is here, shepherding me around. She's a fan of Chimamanda, Adichie. Or when I hear the looting leaders of today, I remember the visionary and selfless leaders of yesterday. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Bafemi Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello, Emeagwali Okpara, Alex Ekwueme, Shehu Shagari, Sam Mbakwe, Aminu Kano, Balarebe Musa, Bola Ige, Lateef Jokonde, Samuel Ogbemudia, and yes, the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, has earned his place in Nigeria's history as a leader and statesman. I don't want to forget footballers, athletes, musicians, and Nollywood stars, all brandishing our green, white, green flag to the world. The list is long, and sometimes I wish that Wole Soyinka or Chimamanda Adichie writes the bestseller entitled, quote, Nigeria, the Counter-Narratives. The point here is simple, and that is that for every one big challenge Nigeria has, there are possibly 10 or more than 10 opportunities out there. Lagos State, for all its problems, is still, if it were a country, will be amongst the 6 richest African countries if Lagos were to be a country. I believe that God has blessed Nigeria with everything to be the most prosperous home for the black race. We need to unleash the creative geniuses in our people by designing the appropriate institutions to power a 21st century economy without oil. I think for the elite, I have a message. and that is that the elite need to come together. The party is over. The time of the pretense is over. These children, in the next 30 years, you probably have, out of the 400 million, more than 300 million of them will be youths. They need jobs, they need education, they need water, they need housing, they need everything. If the elite can come, even if the only thing they can agree on is that we should all make it a policy, a thrust, an aspiration, a goal to give to these kids that are coming of the future what we enjoyed. Through my primary, secondary, and university, the children of the rich and the poor attended the same school, taught by the same teachers. Today, the children of the poor, the children of the rich are back in school today, talking about their summer holidays, where they flew to. The children of the poorest of the poor, especially the bottom 50%, the bottom 25% of our people, over 10 million of them even without school, without any access to education. We must make it as a goal as the elite to offer to the children of the future similar education that we offer to our own children. That should be the kind of minimum template for this future, of the future that I talk about. The current National Assembly can choose to do something historic or continue to kick the can down the road, and hopefully a future parliament will come to the rescue. We have no other country but Nigeria, and we must make it work. If God in his infinite wisdom decided to put us together thus far, there must be a reason. As Africa deepens its integration, starting with the continental free trade area, I dream of a future United States of Africa, and possibly with Nigeria as its California. I see our huge problems, but my focus is on the solutions. The choice is ours. And if you believe that Nigeria, and I believe that if we together choose to work hard at them, the Nigeria of our dream is eminently possible. Do you believe? Thank you very much, and God bless you.